Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is an open meeting of the Needham Finance Committee. I'm Joshua Levy, Committee Chair. It's Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022, and the meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Public access to this meeting does not ensure that there will be public participation unless the law requires it. This meeting will not have public comment except in connection with the first item of business, citizen request to address the Finance Committee. First, I will confirm that a quorum of the members of the Finance Committee are present. When I call your name, please acknowledge your presence. Barry.
Here.
Dick.
Here.
Dick and Rick are here. Carol.
Here.
Jim.
Here.
Louise.
Here.
John.
Present.
And the chair is here. As a reminder, anything you share or state will be a matter of public record. As a preliminary matter, I would ask for a motion to continue the meeting to February 9th, 2022 in the event of a technical disruption this evening.
So moved.
Second.
We'll take a roll call. Barry.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
Dick.
Yes.
Louise.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the first item is citizen request to address the Finance Committee. If anyone would like to address the Finance Committee, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. You can also press *9 if you're on your telephone. I'm looking at the attendees right now and I don't see anyone raising their hand. We can give them a minute while we just address the next item, approval of minutes of the prior meeting, January 26th, 2022. I think there were maybe, I don't know, did everyone have a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Yes.
I did. There were a number of rewrites, but no substantive changes. So I move their approval.
Second.
Any comments? Okay, we'll take a roll call. Barry.
I will abstain since I was not there.
Okay, Carol.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
Dick.
Yes.
Louise.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, I still do not see anyone raising their hands, so I'll take that as no citizens wanting to address the Finance Committee. So the next item are department budget hearings, the public library. So I see Jay Fialkov and Rob Pettit. If Dave, you'd be able to move them over. Also Carol Jean Thomas, excuse me. And I think Louise has an introduction.
May I bring the chair? May I bring the director as well?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. I didn't see everyone on the list.
As I'm bringing them in, you might as well continue.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So first off, I do want to introduce Kim Hewitt, who is the new director of the Needham Public Library. She and I had a great meeting regarding the budget. And so the budget that was submitted to the Finance Committee was, I think, prepared by the prior library director. Kim just started 2.5 months ago or 3.5 months ago. Yeah. So as we were going through the budget, there were a couple of adjustments that are going to need to be made. And I had asked that Kim prepare answers to questions that I had. So some of the adjustments are an adjustment to the Minuteman Library Network, which is going up from what our normal fee is for that particular service. And I had also asked for information about the MAR to make sure that we are eligible for the full amount of the state aid. And we are, and Kim provided that information. And then I had also asked for information about the library state aid account, trust accounts, et cetera, since I know a number of different Finance Committee members generally ask about that. So the library budget request as submitted was less than a 1% increase over the prior year budget. The increase really reflects changes in salary, as well as the fact that there are a number of Monday holidays where the library will be closed. I think that the finance committee should add to the budget the difference in the Minuteman assessment to be part of the Minuteman Library Group, since we know that that's a known expense that was not taken into consideration at the time that the budget was created. The library, interestingly, in this continuing COVID environment, is both back to operating the way it was prior to COVID and has now taken on a new area of programming, which are remote programs. So the library has actually expanded the way in which it provides services and the number of patrons to whom it provides services as a result of COVID. One of the other items that Kim and I talked about was the continuing use and increased use of the library by teens. As you know, after school, teenagers just walk across the street to the library, and this continues to be a very, very crowded time at the library. And Kim has a number of ideas of how to improve the service delivery to the teens in town. So we went over DSR4s, and I don't know if you want to go directly into DSR4s, Josh, or if you want to pause to look at DSR1 and DSR2. I really didn't see anything there, but other members of the committee may have questions.
Yeah, it looks like Dick has a question.
Yeah, and this is just informational purposes. I noticed on the salary line, there are a number of increases in the 5% range. Was that due to reclassification, or what drove those?
Go ahead, Kim.
Yes, I believe those were mostly due to the schedule changes.
Scheduled in terms of the contract? Because contract don't normally kick up that much.
We are non-union.
Oh,
Steve, are you trying to jump in?
Go ahead, Dave.
Yes, Mr. Chair, there are two things that were driving the increases. One, we've had turnover in staff in the department, and they're starting below the top of the pay scale. So there's a combination of a change in the wage schedule and in the step raises for the employees. That's why it seems higher than in past years.
But that's not across the board. So there are only certain positions that are higher. Those are the positions that were part of the classification and compensation, right, Dave?
Actually, all the positions were, but some of them were at different steps, and the compensation is different. The range in changes in compensation level was significant between no change at all to amounts which doesn't affect anybody in the library, but there have been some positions where it's like a 10-15% change.
Thank you. I had a question about the Minuteman assessment. So I saw it was a pretty big increase, the $12,000. I think it was about 13%. Is that typical of annual increases for the Minuteman assessment?
It is not. It's typically more like 2 or 3%. And I actually want to address that. The request in the DSR1 as written does cover the membership fee portion of it. So if you saw in that document with the MLN fee schedules, part of the increase was to our member fee and part of it was for digital content. So it is actually okay as is, and whatever is unaccounted for, or rather not recommended in terms of the Overdrive basic cost, we will be asking the trustees to support, but the 12,000 is actually not, is accounted for the membership fee. This was something that was working out today, sorry.
So just so I understand, the 12,000 is not a part of the membership fee? Or is,
A portion is, but the portion that was accounted for in the request that you all have.
got it, okay, thank you.
But no, it is typical that it's only 2 to 3% increase a year.
Do you know what drove that increase this year?
Yes, they voted to increase overdrive spending because it's such a large part of our circulation numbers overall.
Got it. Okay, any other questions with the base budget? Okay, then, yeah, why don't we move on to DSR fours?
So DSR4s, so the order in which they are in the book is not the order in which Kim has them. So the one that is number 2, which is titled Full-Time Administrative Assistant, is actually priority 1. And this is an existing position. It's a part-time administrative assistant who is basically the business manager for the library, who does this job part-time and would be a full-time position. So with respect to this one, it is for weekly payroll, all purchase orders, preparing invoices, etc. Some of this work was being done by Anne McFate and really should be done by an administrative assistant. That is the request. I actually think that this request is very valid for the library, given the number of employees and bills that get processed. And I think we were looking at that number, Kim?
We were, so the request as written has $63,235 as a salary. That didn't seem to account for the fact that this position is already in our budget as a part-time position for 26,000 in some change. So the total actual request for the salary is actually only $30,352.
And there are no additional, or are there any additional benefit costs?
There are benefit costs. That is $32,389, which brings it to a total of $62,714 instead of the $95,624.
So as part-time, there were no benefit costs associated with the part-time position.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will say that I know the person who is in this position. I actually tried to hire her away from Needham at one point. She's really good. So anyway.
Excellent. This would be a huge help to me. She just deals with so much in her 19 hours, and there's always more that I find myself spending time on that are more administrative tasks that I'd prefer to delegate so that I can kind of focus on my role.
So then we looked at Overdrive basic subscription as being really priority 2. So Overdrive basic subscription is basically ebooks. And this really has become part of the core services that the library provides to patrons. This would just be for the basic service for ebooks. There is an upgrade, Overdrive Advantage, which we did discuss at this point in time. Probably makes sense to continue funding through the state aid account. So, Mr. Chair, if that's okay, Kim might be able to elaborate a little bit on Overdrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yes. So we have seen an increase. I was looking at our numbers for the calendar years because fiscal year 21 kind of gets broken up into COVID situations. Compared to our numbers in 2019, which was a full calendar year without COVID, we've seen an increase of 26% since then. We had 81,472 circulations of items in the calendar year of 21 and served just under 3,000 individual residents of Needham with that service. So it's definitely here to stay. It's 19% of our total circulation in last calendar year. And it is something that we are asking for $33,000 to cover the cost of the basic request. However, I am prepared to, I think if we got an increase of 0.05% to our materials line, which is $15,000, we would be able to satisfy this request by reallocating our other materials funding on physical items and just decreasing that so that we could incorporate a chunk of this into our municipal operating budget, because it truly is a core service, and it is something that the state board counts toward their material expenditure and all of that too, because they count an ebook as a book.
So that means the increase could be something less than $33,000, but you would still be able to incorporate it into your operating budget.
Yes, and with the Minuteman budget that came out, our assessment actually did go up for the digital content because they voted that big increase, which is $39,000. But we're still prepared to, kind of make adjustments elsewhere if we can get this into our municipal budget in some way.
Carol, go ahead.
A question, does the increase in the Minuteman allocation to Overdrive kind of help the kind of bottleneck, if you will, at the library?
It does. That's exactly what it's for. Yes, so that's what Overdrive Advantage helps with for our residents specifically, but then at the network-wide level, their spending on Overdrive Basic gets kind of pieced out to communities based on their usage overall. So purchasing a larger collection will give our residents access to more upfront and help us, or help the network really, to buy more digital copies of books that are, that have longer wait times. So it will decrease the waits for folks too.
Okay, thank you.
So then priority number 3 is what used to be priority number 1, which is the public library reference librarian / digital communications specialist. And this is an entirely new position. Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so I think this request as a specialist isn't something that I really see as part of my vision. I think what we really need at the library is another person in reference. Right now, we don't have enough desk coverage to really be out in the community doing like classes at the Cath or participating in sort of outreach opportunities to do programming and trainings outside of our building or even inside our building, really. Our teen librarian currently doesn't have any hours in the teen room because she is just at the reference desk. So I kind of would see coming back next year, if this was not recommended, to come back with kind of more of a vision, but I do see it being just a generalist position, not a specialist.
And what we talked about at our meeting was really the need for the teen support.
Yes. Yeah, that's huge. I think this month maybe less so than other months, but generally when you're here in the afternoon, you will see that there are, 50 to 100 teens scattered about. And there's a lack of kind of community and relationship building there with the teen librarian. She doesn't get to spend time with them or help them or build that relationship. She gets to do some programs here and there, but really that we want that relationship building because we want the teens to kind of behave in the library, and that helps if they feel kind of ownership and like they have this relationship with someone. So that's sort of where my focus is right now, because that's such a clear and obvious need that we have in the building.
Is there the fourth DSR4 that you want to talk about?
So then we have the other 2 DSR4s, I think, or 3 DSR4s are DSR4s that we see every year. the OCLC WorldCat, the Overdrive Advantage, and the public library page. And I think right now with the OCLC WorldCat and the Overdrive Advantage, the library and the trustees are ready to fund those through the state aid account as they have in the past. The pages, I think the need for additional staffing has been met in the past, either through the library state aid account or salary savings. So we don't really see salary savings at the library. We just, pick up the costs of some of these other, the pages, for instance, that otherwise would be picked up by state aid. So those are really the same as what we have seen in past years.
And I think yesterday the town manager's recommendations came out. So just for context, I think the town manager recommended priorities 1 and 2.
Yeah, but I don't think she recommended them in the amount that we discussed.
Priorities 1 and 2 as restated.
As restated, yes.
Yes. Rick, did you have a question?
Yes. In reading the material that Kim sent on state aid, I was fascinated over the program that I think, if I have this right, the library would like to lend material that isn't in printed matter. But
So I was getting to that.
I was fascinated by that, and I'll remove the question if you're going to talk about it. But let's be sure you cover it. I found that fascinating.
Yes. Luis, would you like me to?
Yeah, go ahead, because this is like a new thing for Needham that other libraries are doing this.
Yes. My previous experience was at Newton and at Waltham, and both started these collections several years ago, and they were insanely popular at both with very different communities. Everybody loves a library of things because it's exciting. It gives you that opportunity to try something that you're not sure you're going to like, or if your teenager is maybe interested in guitar for like a month, they can try it out for a little bit and then return it. So those are the types of things that a library of things really speaks to, things that you may not be able to afford, or the cost per use for you doesn't add up, but you might want to borrow, or things that I personally don't keep around the house, like a stud finder, but would check one out if I was hanging some materials and bring it back. We did a poll in the community, and we got a really great list of responses. And I thought it was really interesting too, that 42% of the people who responded to the demographic questions, because they weren't, their demographic questions were not actually required to be responded. So I do want to give that caveat, but 42% of the people who responded said they lived in a household that brought in over 200,000 a year, which means this isn't about really just people who aren't able to afford things. It's also just something they're excited about, trying new things and having access to materials that they may not want to own forever. Even things like sewing machines, I'm sure people can afford them, but they might not need it. And it's a huge thing to keep in your house for not very much use. So these are the types of things that we're looking at. And I included a list of a lot of the responses that we got and what we were sort of thinking of as our tier 1. We are looking to fund some of it through state aid as a yearly cost, particularly for maintenance of some of the machinery. Well, I shouldn't say machinery. Most of it's not. Like a sewing machine might need a tune-up or something is what I mean. But things like a ukulele, Roku's with a subscription service attached to them so that you could try out Disney Plus or Amazon Prime or whatever it is for that one show that you want to watch, and not have to remember to like cancel subscriptions. Those are the types of things that we're really excited about, and that tend to do really well in all the communities that do have a library of things with these items.
Yeah. In terms of funding, do I understand it correctly that it'll come out of state aid, or is funding going to come out of any other place?
Nope. So funding is going to come for the initial collection, I think, from the friends of the library. And then we are looking to have a budget each year so that you can kind of add to it, repair things, replace whatever needs to happen there. because there are different costs associated then with a book replacement.
Yeah, I just think it's great that you're thinking about reinventing your service delivery on different things. I think that's neat.
Thanks. Yeah, they are so popular in every place, and everyone on staff is just dying with excitement for us to actually get it started. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Just let the state pay for it, that's all.
John.
Two questions or maybe a question and a comment. The question is where in the library will you have a place or places to store these things? And then two, I think if you're, I don't know, not the term is rent, but if you have machines or any other types of things you're letting people use, I think you might want to make sure you have them sign a release of liability so that the town isn't taking anything on that gives out a sewing machine and then wrecks someone's hand. So I'm sure you've thought about that, but I just want to make sure that it's part of your process.
Yes.
Thank you.
That is a standard kind of thing that people offer. And some of the, poll responses for large machinery are not things we're going to get, like a snow blower or something like that, because it's just a little too far for us. But the focus is mostly on like crafty things, instruments, things that are probably not going to harm you any more than a book might. But to your first question about where we would store them, we have a closet right in the circulation area that currently is used for supplies. And it just, there's 3 walls of shelves, and one of the shelves is going to be enough space for all of the things. So that's kind of what we're thinking.
Nice. Barry, did you have a question?
I was actually going to ask about the storage as well, but I'm actually curious, based on your experience. Obviously, you said there's a lot of excitement about this. What ancillary benefits have you seen as a result of this? If you can identify any.
Benefits to patrons or?
Yeah, obviously people, it'll bring potentially bring new people to the library, maybe that don't use it a lot. But what other ancillary benefits have you seen as a result of this?
I mean, certainly that, but there's a lot of different things, I think, because some of it is you hear just anecdotal evidence from patrons that something really made a difference for them. Things like a memory apron, which is a kind of a thing. It's what it sounds like. It's an apron that someone wears, and when they have dementia, and there are different little like zippers or things on it to kind of keep their hands busy, stuff like that. So you hear a lot of feedback about the way that things, the things you were like kind of checking out affected your life. But then you also see things like, even Legos or some of the toys for kids and teens, drones, things like that, learning how to program those things or learn a new skill through use of these things is very beneficial, I think, for the future job market, especially if you get, there are all kinds of little engineering sort of toys for kids and things that teach them how to program. And so it is building those skills year after year to kind of get ready for the next job market, because that's kind of where a lot of jobs have already gone.
You should put a Raspberry Pi on that thing in
Yes.
library things. Yeah.
Yes, those are very popular.
I had a question. I was just looking through the documents that were circulated, and I noticed in the state aid encumbrances, security cameras, and that was the largest amount or item. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So we currently have a number of security cameras. However, our building is a little bit odd in its shape. It's like a big L. And there are areas where we can't really see, and every once in a while need to kind of refer back to footage. But particularly the parking lots have been the 2 biggest areas where we had, a stalking incident. I don't know how long ago. I'm not as in depth on the specifics of that, but I know that we had that incident and someone kind of hit someone else's car at some point, and the police had asked if we did have cameras, and we do not have cameras there. So that's kind of what we're looking at, placing them in those areas where we've had a need in the past and it wasn't there.
Okay, so are these new devices or are these replacement devices?
So I believe actually that some of them are replacing the current system and then adding a few, because the current ones that we have are out of date to my knowledge. We have to work with the buildings department to figure this out. So this has been kind of a slow moving thing for me, unfortunately, at the moment. But I know it's something that staff and trustees feel like we need to really make headway on in the next month or two. So that's good.
Got it. Louise, go ahead.
So the last thing that we did talk about was the library space and potentially using some of the state aid funds for some minor upgrades or renovations, looking at the children's room, looking at teen space, looking at relocating materials to open up space and maybe even free up staff. And so I think, you know, Kim had some really good ideas about that, and we don't control the library state aid. Those are funds that are appropriated directly to the library. And so the library director with the library trustees spend those funds. But there were a number of different areas that Kim had that she thought improvements could be made.
Definitely. I'm happy to talk about those if there's time, but you know, as Elise had mentioned earlier, the teen space is certainly on my mind. It's a very tiny area for the amount of teens that we have here. And so we were having conversations with Hank Half about, you know, kind of building 2 walls potentially to build out the room to be a larger space for teens. And that would require reworking some of the storage for materials for teens. So that's kind of my biggest goal overall. And I would hope to be able to use some of these funds towards that in the future when we're ready. And then, you know, the children's room right now, the lighting is a really big issue. If you've ever been in, especially in the evening, the very back of the room has this different lighting and it's very, very dim, not a welcoming place to go read a story with your child or do any homework because you won't be able to see. And you can't really read the books on those stacks with all their tiny spines and no contrast because of the lighting. So we're working on that too. And we're not 100% there in terms of picking a lighting fixture, but this is the type of thing where we would hope to use state aid once we do have something in mind as we work with the electrician and Hank Half, who I forget his exact title, but one of the kind of building
Director of
Yes.
Building Design and Construction. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, those sound like good initiatives. Anyone else have any other questions? Go ahead, Jim.
I just want to make a statement. I think that your presentation was fantastic. And I'm very impressed with what you're trying to do. I think the library is, it's always been a hidden gem, you know, free public library. It's been around for 200 years or so. And I read your submission and listened to your comments tonight, and I'm very impressed. And here's the only catch. Our librarians stay here for 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew that was going to come up.
Any event, I wish you the very best. I think you're doing great. You got a great first step. So I support your initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to working together for years. I don't know if I'll be here in 50 years. Hopefully I'll be retired.
And Jim has been here for the entire time the library's been here.
Wow.
Just for the record, in 1993, one of my first assignments was the library.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Welcome. And thank you, Jay, and thank you, Rob. I know we've had conversations over the past year, and I think it sounds like it's a really good, I think, budget that you've presented. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's nice to see you all again. We appreciate it. We're very, very, very excited about what the library's accomplished over the last year, and excited about Kim and her imagination and her energy and all that we can look forward to with the library with your support. So we very much appreciate it.
Yeah, we're
Thank you.
looking to continuing the dialogue over the next year.
Definitely. Take care. Have a good night.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the attendees back to attendees, and I'll bring in Lee Newman.
Thank you, Dave. And I also see the chair and vice chair of the planning board if they want to be brought in as well.
Certainly.
Thank you. And I think Carol has an introduction.
Certainly. Just let me know when they're here. Is Lee in?
I think we're still waiting. Hi, Adam.
Hi, thanks, folks.
Welcome.
So the chair and vice chair, Lee Newman, and Deb Anderson, the director of conservation, are all with you.
They're all on. Okay, great. Yes, so Barry, Jim, and I met with Lee Newman via Zoom about 2 weeks ago, I guess, and talked about planning and community development. And as you know, the planning and community development division really includes 3 divisions: planning, conservation, and the zoning board of appeals. This group is largely just really 100% personnel based, with some spending on consultants, both in the budget and as warrant articles. And so for this year, in fiscal year for 2023, the division's total budget is going to increase. Their base budget is going to increase by 2.5% salary and wages. And there is a request for a DSR 4 to increase, and Lee, I'll probably get this wrong, the ZBA administrative specialist from 25 hours a week to 30 hours a week. And part of that is governed by the fact that that position was, it sounds like, regraded and expanded. So it's going from an administrative specialist to a zoning specialist, which expands the scope of their work a bit. And so that position will increase from 25 hours a week to 30 hours a week. And that's a requested increase in the DSR 4 of $9,021. So with the proposed DSR 4, salary and wages are forecast to increase by 4.4%. Total expenses will increase by $2,400, which is an increase of 7%. Part of that is in, it's just communications fees, office expenditures, traveling to conferences, memberships increase. And then there is also a DSR 5 request for a $50,000 to fund the, once again, the small repair grant program, which has been funded at that level since 2020. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Lee to actually just maybe hit some highlights and then talk a little bit about the small grant repair program in the DSR 5.
Okay, sure. So I think Carol gave a pretty good overview of the planning board's budget. I think the one increase that we are looking for on the salary side is to increase the hours of the ZBA specialist. This was a function of the reclassification of that position and its movement actually from an administrative position to a more of a professional planning position to actually meet the needs of the ZBA. This person is now really assisting the ZBA in terms of meeting with applicants and reviewing their applications for completeness and actually following the projects through to actual construction and coordinating with the building inspector on the implementation of the projects once they're completed by the ZBA, and participates in really the planning functions of the department. So it's a function really of the reclassification of the position. It was necessary to actually increase her hours. I think the other thing that we're carrying forward that Carol mentioned is the small repair grant program. This has been a very successful program. It was initially funded, I think in 2020. At that time it was funded at the allocation of $50,000. This is the small repair grant program, which provides, assistance to seniors who need repairs, or low-income residents who need repairs done to their homes. And the grant amounts generally range for between $4,000 and $5,000. And so in 2020, I think we had 13 applications for that fiscal year funding. We're just finishing the 2020 cycle. And we've gone through 2 funding rounds. There's a little bit of monies left, but we're actually looking for an allocation moving forward for the next funding cycle to continue the program, which has been very well received and I think has really been successful. I think the other accomplishment that happened this past year that I think is significant was the work that was done on the emergency rental assistance program. If you remember, we got, I think it was $120,000 through CPC for that program. And then there was a mass COVID grant that and $50,000. So we had $170,000 in that program. And with everybody's help, and there's a lot of people involved in making this happen, we were able to get that program moving and provide rental assistance to, I think we covered, 23 people in Needham. And we allocated almost $147,000. 94,000, I think, are in some change is coming back to the town through the CARES program. So I think that's financially, I think that's maybe is that an overview of I think some of the high points of what we covered this past fiscal year and what we're asking for moving forward into next year.
Thank you, Lee. That's helpful.
I just had one comment, and Lee, your group has done a really good job during COVID of moving almost everything that you do and a lot of the permitting process to do that digitally. And can you just kind of comment on, your ability to continue to perform that online service versus kind of going back to the office?
Well, we are working in the office. More than we did certainly before. When COVID first happened, of course, we were all working remotely, and I have a really strong team of professionals behind me. And we were able to successfully, you're right, move to a permitting function that was really completely remote from our homes with digital access to all of our files, and to move to a platform where we were meeting with applicants remotely using the Zoom technology, using conferencing, phone conferencing, and basically moving the boards to Zoom meetings like what you're doing, and actually holding public hearings under that format. We have moved back to providing coverage in the office. And most of my staff is working a combination of on-site and off-site. And we've created really a protocol where at least one of the divisions, there's a representative of one of the disciplines in the office every day of the week. But there's not a full staffing in the office every single day of the week. And we do a lot of appointments and meetings still through Zoom. I would say that in the last 2 years, since COVID happened, I haven't done one meeting face-to-face with an individual. It's always been through Zoom or through a conference call. And I think the division has been quite successful embracing this new technology. And I think we're quite effective at it. And I actually feel for myself, I'm accomplishing more than I did when I was actually physically in the space, 5 days a week, although it felt like 7.
Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Lee or for the members of the planning board? I guess I'll just throw out a question. So I know there's periodic funding that's been done for zoning studies. I'm just curious what the status of that funding is and if you expect any additional request coming maybe next year.
I'm not sure what I really don't have a good answer for you. I don't think right now we haven't touched any of those monies, and I don't see us needing to touch those monies for at least for the next 6 months. We're working on an affordable housing plan, and we have a housing specialist on board, Karen Sonneborg, who's really leading that effort. And we haven't felt the need to bring in outside consultants to assist us there. And in the major commercial projects that we're reviewing, the consultants on that end can be covered and are being covered through the town's peer review strategy, which is how we cover traffic studies, and which is what I anticipate we'll be doing when we see, redevelopment proposals, for example, at the Muzzy Motor site. So right now, there's not a study that's been identified to utilize those funds.
Okay, that's still helpful. Thank you. Dick.
Yeah, in the write-up, there's a lot of attention paid to the development of the Needham Crossing and N Squared areas. Is it too early in the COVID cycle to make any projections as to the implications going forward, in that this suggestion of office buildings will be less demand for office space and so forth? So is it too early at this point to make any projections as to what's on the horizon there?
Well, on the horizon there, I think you're aware that, the redevelopment for Children's Hospital is still on the table. And that's a big chunk of the redevelopment proposed for Center 128 West. I'm not aware of any significant new projects, going forward in that district. I haven't been approached on anything. I think the big thing on the table now really is probably the Muzzy site, and the redevelopment that we're seeing now in the Carter building, which is happening. I have had some preliminary meetings with folks who own property in the Chestnut Street Business District and the Center Business District, who are exploring the idea of doing mixed-use development under the town's overlays. But those conversations are at a very early level. And I know the hospital's doing some planning for expansion, I think, along the Chestnut Street corridor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are the areas that are probably in play.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Lee. Thank you, Paul, Debbie, Adam. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go back as attendees.
Thanks, Dave. The next item, I don't know if anyone is actually in the attendees to speak to this, the Minuteman assessment. Dave, if once you're finished with that, I'll ask you a question. Go ahead, Louise.
Yes.
Is John, are you still our representative?
Oh, you're on mute, John.
I am, but I haven't gotten that number for it yet.
That was actually my question. I know there is a number in the request, but I wasn't sure if that was the final number. Dave,
I think it's a placeholder, but
go ahead, Dave.
It is a placeholder in the preliminary estimate that I learned about yesterday, has the number at $1,440,561, or $42,612 less than our placeholder. They don't expect to firm that up until they have a better sense of, they being Minuteman, until they have a better sense of what their state aid is actually going to be.
Okay. As I was looking through the documents, I just noted that enrollment from Needham is up, which I think is good. I mean, I think that's what we wanted when we invested in the new Minuteman building.
The building is full, and it's probably exceeded the original projections as to where they thought they'd be at this time.
They're going to need another building?
No, but they did leave some space for add-on, and they're seriously looking at getting that going.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jim.
Is the amount that's attributed to us, is it at this point in time done per pupil? Number one, and number two, are we still allowing other towns to send students to Minuteman at a bare bones rate? Back in the day, it was $5,000 per student when we were paying $14,000 per student in Needham.
So I was looking at the formula the other day, actually. The amount that is charged each town is based upon an average enrollment over the past certain number of years.
Right.
And then I believe out-of-district students are still able to enroll, but I do not think that there are enrollment values. I think they actually have to pay more per student if they're out of district.
I'd love confirmation on that, because in the old days, that was never the case. Out of placement students, in particular Watertown, was literally paying $5,000 when we were paying $13,000 to $14,000.
I think the reality very soon is there will not be any out-of-district students at that school, given what's going on with the projections. It is a smaller school than the old one in terms of capacity, deliberately. And that was part of the reason that I think in the past that they try to encourage other towns to participate and induce them to do so. That will not be necessary in going forward.
Well, I'd still love confirmation. So since my representative is John Conley to the Minuteman School District, perhaps my friend could take a little peek into it.
James, you will get that.
Yeah, and it is different. It is a slightly higher rate than for in-district.
I think David has a.
Dave has, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
And Mr. Conley, of course, will confirm when he checks with the school. But yes, and as Ms. Miller mentioned as well, is one of the changes with the new district plan and actually amendments to the state law. They're actually able to charge more for the cost of the students, taking into account the capital costs. And that was really the difference, is the capital costs weren't passed on to the tuition paying communities, now that they are. Second is the students that were there on tuition are still there, and they are leaving. The school does not have the capacity to take new out-of-district students, so it's just enrollment. And the assessments based on a combination of what the state calculates what your net minimum requirement is to pay for your students, in those items which are not impacted upon your quote ability to pay are on a per capita basis. Those are things such as school transportation, school lunch, and programs like that. And then lastly, the assessment, which is also based upon your share of the enrollment, is the debt service associated with the new school. And of that $1.4 million assessment, 400,000 of it is actually related to debt service for fiscal 23, or approximately 30% of the total assessment.
So, Mr. Chairman, to Dave, what is the cost per pupil to attend Minuteman versus the cost per pupil to attend Needham High School? Number one. Number two, Is Minuteman at this point a vocational school? Or is it just an alternative school that offers the same programs that Needham High School does?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the most current numbers. A few years ago, vocational education is more expensive, as the committee is aware of. I can get those updated numbers, but it's significantly more, usually 2 to 3 times more than a basic academic education.
And that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Davison, that would be if the education that was being provided at Minuteman was beyond the basic high school education, which from 1995 until 2010 was not the case. There were students attending Minuteman who frankly were taking the same classes that they could have taken at Needham High School. It wasn't vocational. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And then and to the second question is, there's certainly vocational programs offered in the trades, in many of the trades. There's also the hybrid programs in technology and such, but we can certainly get an update as to the full offering of Minuteman's programs, which I don't know off the top of my head, but basic items that you think of as a vocational school: carpentry, electrician, HVAC, auto mechanics. They still do offer those types of programs.
So the programs of Dr. Fitzgerald have now been eradicated. The advanced French, the advanced calculus and all that, which is what frankly he was trying to do. Is that all, has it all been gone?
Yeah, I think, Jim, if I'll jump in, and I can't answer it in full, but my understanding and experience is that almost all those courses are gone, but for whatever courses are necessary for MCASs, but everything else is all the specialty things such as robotics, culinary, early childhood programs for taking care, early childhood education programs. They have theater. They have a theater program that is basically all about building sets and structures for theaters and other types of things that are all available and part of the curriculum at Minuteman.
That sounds
Thanks,
great.
John.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Any other questions about Minuteman? Okay. Next budget is the building department. Dick, do you want to give?
I will. Is Dave Roach available?
Yes, I see him on the attendees.
Good.
Dave, would you move him over, please?
He is coming in now.
Okay.
Thanks.
We're going to do a 2-part presentation on the building department. You'll recall that this is one of the areas where we've asked to do a somewhat different approach to the budget process, and I'll get into that in a minute or two. Tonight, we'll focus on the basic budget as presented. Essentially, the budget here is a compensation-driven budget. We have just under 10 full-time equivalents with a total payroll cost of just under $800,000. That payroll cost is up a little over 1% this year due to contract steps and so forth. There is roughly $50,000 worth of expenses for this department, but those 60% of those expenses are in reality employment driven because they reflect the outsourcing of specialized activities, the fire analysis that is performed by the state, as well as the weights and measures calculation, neither of which it would make sense for our department to try to develop the expertise to do. Those 2 outsourced costs combined for a roughly $30,000 cost. The full-time equivalents, we have 3 full-time inspectors and 3 part-time inspectors. And Dave, I think this is the first time in some time that we're fully staffed. And that has made for much smoother operation, notwithstanding the COVID situation. So you might want to mention that a little bit, Dave.
Okay. And I will. And thank you very much, Dick, for your cooperation through this, and you've been a great help. And as everybody in the committee probably knows, I just taken the last month off for a medical issue, so that's one of the reasons why we didn't have a full presentation tonight. But I want to ask a question. What other departments were going to be looked at under this priority-based budgeting for this year?
The Planning and Community Development Department was the other one.
Okay, so based on what I saw, or what I just heard from the planning department, I probably dove into this a lot more in depth than I needed to. And
Well, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy, Dave, so.
no, I know, and we've done a tremendous amount of work here to try to scrutinize and justify what my department does. And when you see the basic budget here, the budget's the budget, and we're basically told to keep things like department mission and what's on the horizon all down to a reasonable amount of literature they need to put into the budget. But our department is, we provide a function for the town, and that function is to basically protect the homeowners, the builders, or whatever, and make sure whatever they're doing is being done according to the code. Like Dick said, I've been here, this is going to, in May, will be my 10th year. And I think for the last 2 years is the first time we've actually been fully manned in all departments. And that's been great, because we've had problems trying to fill some of the positions because they're part-time. I think the adjustment with the monies made a big difference, because you're looking at inspectors that are professionals, and when they're professionals out in the field and they're plumbers and electricians, and what they're making in the field and what we're paying for them to be inspectors is off the charts. So it's not even a comparison. So it's difficult enough to try to get somebody in, but you got to make it worthy, make it welcoming enough that they're going to stay and they do the job that they do and they're happy with what they're doing. So again, that's made a huge difference. I think what's going to happen now that we're fully staffed and what we see on the horizon coming up with, Muzzy and Children's Hospital and all that, that gives us the opportunity now to dedicate staff to some of these larger projects where I was bringing in people to do that before to try to cover the staff that we had. So that's all good. I'll touch briefly on what Dick and I have been working on, and honestly, our first meeting, I said to Dick, what are they asking for? I have no idea. There's no criteria here. There's no footprint of what they're asking for. So I started off with more of an in-depth description of my department and what every
Let me give you a little background, if you would, Dave, and then I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah.
We looked at priority based, and we said, okay, the first issue we think is, what are the priorities of the department? So what we then try to do is to identify the key priorities of the department. Then secondly, since the department budget is largely personnel cost, what we've tried to do is to figure out, are the personnel functions being performed, do they align appropriately with the priorities, or is there any misalignment there? And that's what's taking a lot of time to try to come up with a good approach to try to check that out. And so Dave has been extremely patient in trying to develop that. And we're trying not to get too granular, but try to get down enough so that there's enough data to draw reasonable conclusions from. Go ahead, Dave.
Right, and I don't want to set a precedence here by what we're presenting by any means that every other department is going to produce what we're producing here in pure facts. I mean, I basically took every person that works in my department, we broke it down into an hourly basis every day on what they do. We have somewhere between 24 and 30 functions that any one of the employees in the department does during the day. And then we took that a step further and say, let's break that down into 15-minute increments per employee and find out, how many transactions they actually doing in that 15-minute period. So, we took actual data for 2 days that we did, and I think it was, it was in the beginning of January, which is not the busiest time of year. And we computed all that out. And when it was all said and done, it's, and I'm talking about my clerical office staff, not my inspectors at this point, that it came down to they were doing like 1.6 transactions per every 15 minutes or something like that. So obviously, this is not the busiest time of the year. That 1.6 probably goes to over 2 during the busier time of year. We then looked at the inspectors. We took the month of November, for example. We did 757 inspections the month of November with all my inspectors. That's an average of 38 per day. Now I have I have 6 inspectors out there doing that. So do the math. I mean, they're doing, on an average, they're doing 6 or 7 inspections per day. So we really broke this all down. And like Dick said, what did you learn out of it? Well, I said, what I learned out of this when it was all said and done, and being out of the office for a month, you're never out of the office. You're always in contact by phone, email, Zoom meetings, whatever, is that some of the things that I do, I need to start to delegate out. I need to give to other people, and just so they're aware of what that is, what's going on, such as, certain special permits for signs, special permits for this. I kind of kept that all away from my staff because they have enough things that they're doing, but they need to know that they need to, be aware of what's going on in those aspects of what we do on an everyday basis. So with that said, I talked to Katie King about it, and at some point I'm going to transition out of this and somebody else is going to come in, and I'm going to end up probably putting some sort of a 3-ring binder together on how all these processes work, and that people are aware of what the process is. So it's just kind of a smooth transition. But, we, not only our department, we deal with, the planning department all the time, with ZBA department. I mean, there's always things going on that are related to the building department, but on inspections, on people coming up to the counter, same thing as, complaints and things like that you have to deal with on a regular basis. I take on a lot of that responsibility myself, which I think I'm going to start to delegate a little bit more out as well. So that's what I learned out of the process. I think, again, Dick may agree or disagree. I probably dove into it a little deeper than I had to, but I am going to put all this documentation together. I am going to send it to you guys. And I think it's helpful to see actually what we do and justify what we do. I'm very happy with the staffing level that we have now. I wouldn't ask for any more. I wouldn't ask for any less. I think we're doing very good with what we have. And the good thing is the people I do have now are trained. They've been there for a little while. It makes it easier than rotating staff in and out. And I think moving forward that, we're going to be in great shape, whatever comes our way. But again, I appreciate everything Dick has done. Dick and I worked together a few times, and I think we've met 3 or 4 times during this whole process. And I know other people on the committee couldn't be with us, but I think the end result is where we ended up here.
David, I think we appreciate the time that you've put into this. And I think we are eager to see what you've put together. And it's also really good to hear that you're fully staffed at this point, because as you mentioned, I think it's difficult, in prior years not being fully staffed. So I think this is, I'm really happy that the department is at this place right now. Rick, go ahead.
Dave, just a compliment that you jumped into this with both feet and dug so deeply. So thank you. I have a couple of threshold questions. You referenced 35 essential functions that you've basically done a time study with. Those 35 essential functions, move upstream for me. Where did you get them? Did you get them from position descriptions that existed? Or where did you come up with those 35 essential functions for which you drove your process?
Right. So a lot of this is obviously, computer-based and what we do every day. And, for example, it's, approved permits, accounts payable, cost of construction review, department. I mean, it's just things that people do every day that we've never actually wrote them all down to figure out what we do in a day. And that was kind of, it was kind of an eye-opener, honestly, to figure out all of the different functions that a lot of these people do on a daily basis. And the good thing about my staff is that we interact together. Everybody does each other's jobs. Everybody knows what the other person is doing. So if we ever get to a position where somebody is out, those people cover them. And that's the beauty about it. But there's nothing written down. I mean, again, it's all based on the software we use, what we ask people through that software, the questions that are asked. I know a couple of years ago when we talked about online permitting and, how that was going to improve, everything with the department. And of course, I think there was a hope that, some people could be eliminated because of the online permitting. All that the online permitting did was provide a function that it made it easier for the user. It still promotes the same questions. We're still back and forth with people, whether you do it online or you do it on the phone, you do it at the counter. It's like, you owe me this, you owe me that, you owe me this, you owe me that. And it's back and forth until the permit's actually issued. So in some cases, it may take a little bit more time with the online process because some people, what would be nice if statewide they use the same software? They don't. So we're lucky enough, there's about 7 or 8 towns around us that use Viewpoint, but other towns are completely different. So it's a training process. We got a couple people in my office are really good with walking people through the process, but it's a process and it takes time. And that's where we came up with the 24 to 30 functions. It's all based on that.
One more question, Dave. A compliment in terms of you cross-training your staff that they could all just pick up so easily. But as you go through this, because the function was really to determine if you budget based on the actual essential function of the department, frankly. Going through this, have you determined that you do things for which you need more money on, or you do some things that you need less money on? Besides the time efficiency, is it showed you any more that other kind of stuff?
I think we're good right now, honestly. We look at other towns and see what they do. We look at other towns and see what they're doing for staffing, and frankly, we know what other towns pay and don't pay. I mean, I've lost a lot of people because of that. I think we got it to that level where we're competitive, and I think people are happy where they are, and that's 99% of it right there. Are they happy with what they're doing? And I think we got to that point finally. In the cross-training part of it, that's just That's what I want them to do. I want everybody to know everybody else's job. There's no secrets there. But it happens because if somebody gets sick or somebody's out or whatever, you take a day off or a week's vacation. I don't want the train to stop, because this is a train. This train never stops in this town. It keeps rolling and rolling every day, no matter what we do.
Thank you.
I think it's fair to say that one of the advantages of the job that Dave and his staff are doing is Needham seems to be a good place to do business in for construction, so forth. We certainly enjoyed a lot of new growth because of that, and significantly, it's being able to interface effectively with the building department. So that's an important part of our overall business strategy, if you will.
Yeah, and I agree, Dick. I'll elaborate on that a little bit. I hear it time in and time out from builders that Needham's a very easy town to build in. I'm not saying that it's easy inspection wise. I'm saying that going through the process, our zoning, the way it's crafted, allows builders to come in and actually build fairly easily. Same thing with our remodeling and all that. We're very liberal with our zoning, but to the point where we're not giving away the store. It's just that if you look at surrounding towns like Newton or Wellesley, we're much more competitive, and that's why builders like to build and need them.
Great. Are there any other questions for Dave?
So we're going to keep this process going. I don't know. I can't put a timetable on when we'll have something to report, but within a couple of weeks, I'm hopeful we'll have something for the committee to consider.
Thanks. I hope it doesn't extend too long, because I know Dave has other priorities, but it would be helpful to see. I think in general, the whole idea of doing some priority-based budgeting is because in every situation, priorities tend to shift over time, or maybe expand in some ways, and knowing in what ways priorities change over time can influence how we budget, what the needs are for that department. So it's not certainly intended to focus on any one department, forever. I think the intention is, over time, maybe on a rotating basis, we can do priority-based budgeting for one or two departments each year, so that we have a general idea of where things are moving and shifting over time, without burdening any one department with what Dave is right. It can be a bit more work to look at it, but we don't want to do that every single year for every department.
And for the record, I kept Kate and Dave Davidson advised as we went along through the process what it was I was asking to do. So if we were overreaching, there was a force out there that could tell us to back off.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, this is basically just a beginning of the overall budget discussion. So now we've discussed individual budgets. I don't know if it's maybe at this time we want to really delve into the budget overall, but I just want to make raise an issue or a suggestion that was made by the town manager to me in light of last week's discussion on the proposed warrant article for the 3-year supplemental funding for the Needham Council on the Arts and Culture. She suggested perhaps creating a separate line item within the budget for just the Needham Council of Arts and Culture that would be outside of the office of the town manager, with 1 year of the suggested funding. I just want to check with the committee if people were amenable to that, to discussing that when we look at the whole budget. Go ahead, Louise.
I am.
Okay. Okay, so we'll, I guess when we do discuss the whole budget, we can include that as a discussion item. do we, I mean, it's 8:20 now. Do we want to start discussing the whole budget? I think it might be best to wait until next week.
You know,
We
Go ahead,
just
Dick.
got the spreadsheets, I think.
Exactly.
Today.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have some more time with the data. Go ahead, Dick.
One of the things I would hope we focus on, it seems like there's this very significant increase in headcount. And we know from experience that inexorably drives expenses. And I would hope that we could really focus on the rationale and the necessity for the headcount increase. It looks like all told, it's like 30 positions being added.
So Dick, are you looking for justification for each one of those positions?
I think we ought to have a process to make sure that we understand the drive. I mean, obviously, I think 2/3 of them are in the school department, and that's oftentimes a special ed requirement and so forth. But I think we need to really focus on that, because the positions that's the only real control you have ultimately over the budget.
I mean, primarily we deliver services. And we have people to deliver those services, so that is a really large part. Carol, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Just a lot of those headcount, like you said, Dick, is in the school department. And frankly, as a school liaison, and John and Josh, you can chime in here, it seemed like a lot of that headcount was like loosely COVID related, but not necessarily rolling off as COVID ebbs. So I don't have an answer to that, but I think that's some of it playing catch up. So,
well, I guess Carol, to that, in one of the meetings with the liaisons, our liaisons and liaisons to the school committee, I did ask the question if these are all in some way or another related to COVID, and we seem to understand that the needs will extend beyond COVID, but we don't know exactly how long beyond COVID. Would it be beneficial to place these in a warrant article so that we understand that they're going to terminate at some point after COVID,
Or in the reserve fund.
or could be reassessed?
Or in the reserve fund.
I suppose we could have that discussion. I mean, I'm not a fan of budgeting through the reserve fund.
I'm a complete non-fan of the DSR 5s and the warrant articles. My own view is, as I've looked at it, I know I've only been here for 2 years, but in the very short 2 years I've been here, I think they're abused. And I think it's simply a way for the departments to put aside a request for monies, to not compete against anyone, to have an agenda group in favor of that issue. You don't have to compare it to anything. It's simply a standalone article, and there it is, up or down. And I think we've lost more than we've won. So,
so in their defense, the use of DSR 5s, I think in some cases, if you know that funding is needed for a fixed amount of time, then wouldn't it be better to put it outside of the budget?
Which is what we have done.
But that's the problem. It's not just that. I'm sorry, Louise. It's not just that. They're actually putting it into they're expecting this to be part of the operating budget for years to come. The PIO is the perfect example.
So, okay, I just want to say about the PIO, I guess, one of the reasons why I think the original request for the PIO was in the budget. And I think the finance committee raised questions and disagreed with it. And ultimately, I think voted not to put it in its budget recommendation. And so the DSR 5 for the PIO was originally put in the warrant as a funding mechanism outside of the budget because it was not approved to be within the budget.
But I think that makes Jim's point.
For that particular position.
And now it's there. And you've got the Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, which is 2 years, but they write right in their thing, they write in, it's expected to be continuing into the future. And then the cultural arts thing, they say it's 3 years, but it's right in there to be continued. And so as a result, you never have to compare it with all of the other requests that are up there. You simply say, all right, we'll let it go as a warrant article for now and maybe another year. But then eventually it's going to come right into the budget. So I'm a bit, and I know no one agrees with me, but I mean, if you put the money in the reserve fund, guess what they have to do to come get the money? They have to come to us and they have to show us why they now need that funding above and beyond that which has been previously approved by town meeting. We're not bad people. It's not like we're going to be fair and reasonable, but at least there's a control there.
Go ahead, Louise.
So I think that would apply for those services that the school department says are needed as a result of COVID. Because for the last 2 years, we have had additional funding for that. And we're going to go in one of two directions. In my view, we're going to go in one of two directions. Either we're going to permanently live with this new virus, in which case we just need to adjust to it. And we just need to figure out, well, what is it that we need to do for this new virus? Or we're not. We're going to go back to business as usual. And this becomes something like the flu. And we don't need additional services. Now, I'm going to tell you that I have a cynical view of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it is used, and I'm not saying by the town of Needham. I think in general, it is being used as an excuse for adding certain things or providing certain services or claims on all kinds of levels by private corporations, by people in general, excuses. And so I for one, am going to look very closely at anything that is being added to a budget due to COVID-19. So, I mean, that's my own view. I think 30 is a lot of additional FTEs. And if, we account for them, I think we were told $32,000 for benefits per person. That's $1 million in benefits. So I think we do need to think about that really, really carefully. But I'm not prepared to discuss in detail anything today.
Yeah.
Others
Go ahead,
might,
John.
be, but I'm not.
Is there a way to add, and Louise, thank you for your spreadsheet. It's awesome. Although I need a magnifying glass, but that's my issue. Can we add a column for each of these categories for the number of employees, the FTEs, the 30, where they're identified? I know a lot of them are on the schools, but it would be nice to have that column just to see where head count is being added. I know you can kind of look in the DSR4 to get a description, but it might be, if there's a way to add a column just to say where the added head count is, that at least for me would be helpful.
I could certainly do that. I also have a more detailed spreadsheet from Dave that has the FTEs in each department that I will forward to.
One of in picking up on some of the themes that I think are coming out now is one of the things that I struggle with, in particular in the schools, is how many having a lot of unfilled positions, and notwithstanding that, asking for more positions. There seems like there's and I'm not using getting by in a word that I'm trying to be flip about it, but the services are being provided and there's 30 unfulfilled positions, and now we're asking for 30 more. And I have a hard time following that logic and wonder, when the point in time comes for us to say, until you fill everything you have, you can't become and ask for more. And I don't know how we can discipline that or how we can do it, but that's just one of my kind of frustrations on this is asking for more positions when you're not even filled with what you have.
I think at one point I asked the superintendent, I think they had held back some money from this year's budget for supplies. And I think he said that if funds allow, he would try to fill those vacant positions through the end of the year. I know that doesn't address your entire concern, but.
And I think, just another point is when you think of all the strides that have been made in automation and the way technology is and things like that, continuing to add positions, 30 a year, and I'm just going to use that as an example, is unsustainable and seems hard to justify at times as well. And I think we need to look at that both for this year and then continuing going forward.
Well, I think not to beat a dead horse, and this is a DSR 5, but I think that the DSI monies for a consultant is potentially a good example of that, because that will likely morph into a more permanent situation at some time in the future. And so my question would be, is that something, does that mean, and we should be asking the question, if that person is going to do DEI, then do we need less of a headcount in HR? But we don't often ask for, who could be replaced by this new position, or what tasks could be supplanted by this new efficiency.
I agree 100%, Carol.
I think one of my thoughts about consulting dollars is I feel like in some cases, if we have a clear idea of what we want, it's better spent on supplies or seminars or something concrete. And sometimes I'll say, when we spend consulting dollars, it's not clear what the value gained is by the end of it. So I know we've had like the Needham 2025 consulting project, and COVID, was something completely unexpected that came in the way. It's good to have this consulting study, but we've had other pressing issues that have come up since then. So maybe if there's a way to fund some of these dollars to other expenses rather than on consulting, maybe that would be preferable.
Right.
Go ahead, Rick.
Josh, kind of a follow-up to what John said relative to technology. We've talked about this before, and I'm not sure if this committee is actual place for it, but there doesn't seem to be maybe a consolidated effort to not only talk about personnel in terms of impact of the things that we've learned via COVID, but space either. And in terms of the stuff that the town does by way of facilities and by the town does as labor, there doesn't seem to be a concerted effort to take a step back and say, okay, there may be some economies and some efficiencies that would overall save costs down the road. There doesn't seem to be, maybe that's going to come as a subcommittee of select board, I'm not sure, but somewhere along the line, we should just take stock in the fact and what we've learned and try and drive our numbers with it down the future. But I have not seen a willingness or even a continuation of conversation. So I'm not sure what to do with it, but I believe it's important and it really needs to be discussed somewhere.
Go ahead, Carol.
So that's, Rick, why I asked Lee to kind of speak to how the planning and community development has learned to operate more digitally and throughout COVID. And she's been 100% virtual, and it sounds like she's staying that way. But yes, there is a presence in the office, but it's about, at any one time, half of what they were prior to COVID. Now, they're a small department, but if everybody did a little bit of that, we might not need Emery Grover. That's a bad example, but you know, we
No,
might be rationing office space a little bit differently.
Yeah, to your point, I was immensely encouraged when Lee spoke about the fact how excited she was in working remotely and being equally as efficient and successful. And I think she's really the only first department manager that's really spoken like that, at least that I've heard of in the meetings that I've been at. Others seem to shy away from the fact that remoteness is so debilitating to efficiency in running the business that they ran at 50 miles in their direction. So I was very encouraged by her taking great pride in the fact that she had done this successfully. I would like to see that entire initiative undertaken somewhere to get some economies there. Yeah, so I'm glad you raised that. I don't know, I guess, am I crying in the wilderness?
No.
Fellow members, or is it not worth, if this has nothing to do with money, Lord knows I don't know what does.
No, I think we're all looking for some forward thinking, and and COVID should provide the impetus or the catalyst for some of it. And I'm not sure we've seen a lot of it through this process, unfortunately. But we just got to keep pushing for more.
Yeah, but how do we do that? How do we push for more? How do we use who we are as maybe an instigator to some of that in a nice, polite, and gentle way? I'm not suggesting we run right shot over everybody.
I think we do that. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carol.
I think we just have to keep asking kind of the same hard and somewhat annoying sometimes, questions. But I do think, I've heard a lot, and I'm sure you've all we've heard a lot about building maintenance and heat and ventilation, and how these new buildings, even though they're more efficient, are much more costly to operate because of the expertise that's required to run the HVAC system. But maybe we need different types of personnel to run that equipment, as opposed to the people that we have running equipment that's completely new and different, So we just kind of overlay something new on the same structure, and we're not asking how we change how we operate to fit the new building.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think a lot of it also depends on how the executive branch wants to respond to the question. So, I work at a state institution that has 6,500 employees, and at least 3,500 are working remotely. And, that they're no different from many of the people that are in town hall. And yet, we've got 50% of our workforce that's working remotely, and it's working well. But I can't, you can't, and I can't tell them, who can work remotely and who can't. So you need cooperation. You need there to be a desire to try and figure out what's the new normal with respect to how we work in this COVID environment. So I agree with you, Carol. Let's just keep on asking questions, and as you say, and maybe at times we might be a pain in the neck, but let's just keep asking the questions.
Good, go ahead.
Two thoughts. One, when people come and ask for technology advances, it's always justified on the basis, well, it's going to make us more efficient. When the dust settles, what we end up with is a more expensive system and the same head count. So somehow or other, we have to be more disciplined and drive that if you want to make this investment in technology, it's got to produce a saving someplace. So one thought. Second, I'm going to raise a difficult issue. Hopefully this doesn't get any broader exposure than necessary. but I was struck by the fact with the new person running the library, there was a different focus and a different thing. Turnover sometimes is required just because people are going to continue to do things the same way. And it's very good to have longevity in town and people get to know it and work it. But it also, we do need some turnover or else we're just going to have the same functions continued as they've always been done.
I think
It's
I
a
think you're
difficult
absolutely-
topic.
No, I was encouraged by really her thoughts of innovation in a whole bunch of areas in terms of how she answered some of the questions that Louise had asked. I was really encouraged by that. But that speaks, I think, to a whole mindset. I think we don't have term limits, and not to get off track, but we don't have term limits, and so in essence, that doesn't do much to move this ship along. I think also, and don't throw anything at me, but I do think the town is fundamentally too wealthy to think efficiently in areas like this. And so I know Louise from time to time gets angry when we put money into reserve funds as opposed to giving that money back to the taxpayer. And we've talked about that along as well. But there doesn't seem to be an initiative even to think that. So I'm wondering if we're just occupying an environment, trying to do the best we can in a mindset that fundamentally will not be any more efficient than we wish it to be. I don't know. Josh, I've probably taken this conversation way off where it needs to be in terms of this focus, but just some thoughts that all have some bearing on money, which I think is our charge.
Thanks, Rick. You're at the edge. It's okay. I guess on the technology question that Dick raised, I guess there's just another consideration of productivity. So, I mean, technology can make people more productive. I mean, like Zoom, the reason why we can, have meetings remotely and get even more done than we did before is because of technology. And that's actually, I think, really hard to measure and quantify. So just because you have more technology expenses and more people, or even the same amount of people, doesn't mean that it's less efficient necessarily. What I get concerned about with the technology is sometimes, especially with the software, we often have new packages that get added on, and we keep stringing along the old packages along the way, and it's not clear if we still need the old packages. So it's easy for software to legacy software to just continue to be paid for.
Josh, can I make a motion to adjourn?
Can I just add, Jim, I want to go circle back to how you started it with the DSR5, and I'll be brief. Is your suggestion that we should require them that, let's say, and I'll just use the DEI initiative, the 100,000, that should have been a budget request, and flowing that through, if it was a budget request and after we go through all this deliberation, we were to say, no, we don't think it's proper to have in the FY23 budget, won't they then just make it into the warrant article that you're complaining about? So don't we sort of end up in the same place?
I don't know, John, about the process. I do know that it should not have been a DSR5. They intend this to be part of their budget for not just the next 2 years. If you read the write-up, it is into the future. It may even end up being a diversity inclusion officer, which may or may not be a good thing. I don't know. But the point is, it's an operational budget item, and it should be considered in the context of the entire operating budget. Now, if we say no on February 28 or March 2 or wherever our magic date is, are they then able to create a warrant article? I'm not so sure. I think at that point in time, it might be too late. So, I think what we've done is we've given the departments this opportunity to go outside of the regular budgetary process and to have a standalone article, which really doesn't compete with all of the other dollars that we're considering.
But I don't think we don't do the warrant. I mean, how do we control that if that's a decision of the executive?
The warrant closes on March, whatever it is, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
But I think, John and Jim, what it is the finance committee is charged with putting together the budget and presenting the budget to town meeting. And I think what it is if something is truly a warrant article, then it is a Board of Selectmen article. It takes it entirely out of the finance committee
Correct.
recommendation. If the finance committee chooses not to recommend something, it generally is not turned into a warrant article.
But no, but
So-
that's.
But I think that's a philosophical question about what, are these really budget items or are these really warrant articles?
But it's more it's more than philosophical, because the point is, you hit the nail on the head. We have authority over the budget. The budget is our warrant article. Whatever it is, Article 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, that's our article. All of these other financial warrant articles, as Louise points out, are not ours. So we can't control those. But the point is, those warrant articles are supposed to be things that are one-time costs outside of the ordinary budget operations. And I don't criticize, please, just so you know, I've been here for a year and a half. I don't criticize anyone with the thought process of, let's come up with these DSR 5 so we all know what's going on well in advance, and there's no sneaky booze when the warrant comes out at the end of February. I understand it all, but I think it's backfired. I think it's worked against us. That's my only view.
Okay.
I just had two other things I want to say on updates. So just remind everyone that the community meeting hosted by the school department is on February 8th to discuss the school master plan. And I think a link has been sent out about that. And then also I was looking at the COVID numbers and they're starting to come down very close to what they were during our last in-person meeting. I wanted to see if the committee was comfortable with having a hybrid meeting next week.
I'm fine.
Fine with me.
I'm with
Okay.
me.
Then let's plan on doing that. If the Great Plain Room is available, I think that would be preferred. Awesome. Great, so let's do that.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second Jim's motion.
Perfect. We'll take a roll call. Dick,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Louise,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.